I heard it with my own ears, sharp as a pin, quiet as betrayal. Why is he even still alive? The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Sometimes the most devastating things are spoken just loud enough to be undeniable. I stood there, holding a warm dish of apple crumble, the scent of cinnamon and sugar clinging to me like memory. I hadn't been seen yet, but I had heard enough to know something had shifted, maybe forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening in the comments. This is more than just a story. It's a reflection, a reckoning, and perhaps a reminder that silence can speak louder than anything else. What you're about to hear isn't about revenge or bitterness, it's about clarity. About what happens when someone who has been overlooked for far too long decides to step back into the light, not with anger, but with resolve. Arthur Green, 74. A man who once gave everything in the name of family, his savings, his time, his quiet dignity, stood at the edge of a gathering meant to celebrate togetherness, and realized he was no longer part of it. No welcome, no acknowledgement, not even from the grandchildren he once held with shaking, joyful hands. But he didn't leave, not immediately. Because sometimes the first step toward change isn't walking away. It's standing still long enough to recognize the ache in your chest is the sound of something breaking free. And so begins a journey not of escape, but of return. A return to self-respect, to peace, to the quiet, powerful decision to no longer wait for a seat at someone else's table, but to build one of your own. Stay with us. This story unfolds not in explosions, but in small, deliberate acts that echo for a lifetime. The backyard was dressed for celebration. Paper lanterns swayed in the breeze. Long tables creaked under the weight of platters and laughter, and the scent of grilled meat curled around the edges of it all. But none of it reached me. I walked through the gate like a ghost wearing corduroy and aftershave, clutching my apple crumble like it might explain my presence. No one turned. Not even Daniel, my son, who stood with a beer in one hand, and his other arm looped lazily around his wife, Jana, the same voice I'd heard just moments earlier, the same woman who once hugged me like I was the father she never had. She saw me eventually, blinking like I'd stepped out of a fog she thought long dissipated. "Oh, Arthur, we didn't know you were coming." The tone was sharp in its sweetness, too rehearsed to be real. I held up the dish, brought dessert. No one offered to take it. I found an empty chair at the far corner of the table, the kind of chair they save for stragglers or someone's coworker who shows up late to the barbecue. I sat, careful not to let the legs scrape too loudly. The crumble was still warm against my palm. No one asked for a piece. Conversations ballooned around me, orbiting but never including. My grandson ran past twice, maybe 3 times, his shoelaces flapping, his laughter loud. He didn't even glance my way. At one point, Daniel stood up, raised his beer, and toasted, "To family." Glasses clinked. Cheers echoed. I raised my water glass, but no one saw. The ache in my back reminded me to sit straighter. I'd once carried Daniel on those shoulders, through parades, theme parks, the flu. Now he barely carried my name in his tone. Jana approached with a smile stretched too tight, like she'd forgotten how it was supposed to work. "Did you want a plate?" she asked. I looked at her. "I'm fine." She nodded too quickly and walked away before I could ask how her job was going, or if she ever finished the mystery novel I gave her last Christmas. I stayed, helped clear the plates, stack the cutlery, wiped down the sticky table when everyone else retreated inside. It's funny how easy it is to disappear when no one bothers to look in your direction. I picked up the empty crumbled dish and walked out the same way I had come in unnoticed. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, but I didn't feel cold. I felt still, not at peace, not yet but aligned, as if something inside me had clicked into place. The next morning I brewed a single cup of coffee, sat at the same kitchen table where Daniel once did his homework, legs swinging under the chair too big for his frame. He used to need me. Now, he barely tolerated me. I spent the day in silence, letting it settle around me like an old friend. I brought in the mail but left the envelopes unopened. I knew what they said: past due, unsubscribe, addressed to Arthur Green and no one else. That house, their house, it was once mine. The down payment at least. $55,000 wired from my retirement account to the mortgage company. "Just to help you get started," I'd said. No strings. But apparently, no place at the table either. I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the folder labeled Daniel, House. Inside, the deed, the payment records, and the letter I had written by hand, gifting the money without expectation. Because you're my son, I had scrawled in black ink. Reading that line now felt like looking at someone else's hope. That evening, I made a call. Lena Moore wasn't a friend exactly, more a bridge partner from years past, with a keen legal mind and a sharper sense of boundaries. I have some questions about property, wills, that sort of thing, I told her. She didn't ask why, just said, come by tomorrow, bring everything. I slept better than I had in weeks. No pills, no pacing. Just the strange comfort of a direction forming in the dark. The next morning I put on my pressed slacks, polished shoes, the navy wool coat that still smelled faintly of cedar. When you're about to shift the course of your life, you wear something with buttons. Lena's home smelled like lemon polish and mint tea. She looked over the documents, her brow furrowed just enough to make me feel seen. You gifted it, she said, which means it's theirs now. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. She handed me a checklist, crisp and clinical, but it felt like a lifeline. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd once paid bills with my wife's humming in the background. Now it was just the hum of the fridge and the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. I took a clean sheet of paper, wrote Daniel at the top, and drew a single, clean line through it. Not in anger, not even in sadness. Just, finally. On Wednesday, I baked a pie. I had no intention of sharing. Blueberry, with lemon zest and a crust so flaky it would have made my late wife beam with pride. I used the old recipe I used to reserve for birthdays and Thanksgivings, back when the table was full and my chair wasn't the quietest one. This time, though, it was just for me. No holiday, no guests, just a small act of reclamation. I let it cool on the porch while I sat in the wicker chair, a tattered Afghan over my knees, the same one Clara had knitted during the winter of 2096, when snow sat on our windowsills for nearly a week. The street was quiet. A kid rode past on a bike too big for his frame, a lawnmower hummed 2 doors down. It was the kind of afternoon where everything felt suspended, like time had agreed to hold its breath, just for a moment. Then came the car. I recognized it before I saw who stepped out. Michelle, Jana's sister. Tote bag on her arm, bottle of wine tucked under one elbow. She knocked once on Daniel's door, then let herself in like she belonged. I watched from across the street and didn't feel anger, not even envy, just a hollow understanding that whatever space I used to fill in their lives had long since been renovated into something more convenient. I hadn't been invited into that house in over 4 months, not since Ruby's birthday. They sat me near the trash bin. So you're not too close to the music, Daniel had said, smiling like it was a kindness. Ruby hadn't opened my gift until after I'd left a picture book, hand-stitched, with a note tucked inside. For Ruby, with all the love a grandpa can fold into a page, she never mentioned it. I'd seen them since once in the cereal aisle of the grocery store, Daniel in a rush, Jana pretending not to notice me near the apples. Another time at the library, where Ruby walked past me like I was a substitute teacher she couldn't quite place. Still, I had kept a drawer by the hallway filled with stickers, puzzle books, little trinkets. Things for the grandkids, just in case. That day, I emptied it. Every sticker, every novelty eraser, every Matchbox car went into a paper bag. I tied the handles and set it beside the recycling. I watched it sit there for hours, untouched, just like me. That evening, Daniel sent a message. Hey, Jana says she might have hurt your feelings on Sunday. Didn't mean anything. You know how these family events get. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not responded, deleted. I wasn't curating a museum of soft excuses anymore. I wasn't wrapping dismissal in bubble wrap labeled "they didn't mean it." I'd done that for too many years. At 7 p.m., a knock came. For a brief second, I thought. Maybe. But it was Kay, my neighbor from next door, holding a plastic container of lentil soup and asking if I'd seen her cat. I hadn't, but I invited her in anyway. We split the pie. She said it was so good it made her knees hum. I laughed louder than I expected, and I didn't realize how much I needed that sound until it spilled out. Later, I stood in the hallway, picking up an old photo of me and Daniel 1986, a camping trip. He was 8, missing a tooth, grinning like I was the whole world. I stared at that boy, then whispered, "I miss you, not the man, the boy." Then I turned the photo face down. I opened the desk drawer, pulled out the envelope marked legal, my will, my medical directive, the power of attorney I'd given Daniel after my fall, the one he never followed up on, never asked about. I held it in my hands for a long time. Tomorrow, I would go back to Lena, but that night, I sat in the stillness and said goodbye to the idea of a family that only existed in old snapshots and second chances. Lena's office was warm, not just in temperature but in tone, quiet carpets, soft lamplight, a jar of peppermints no one ever seemed to touch, and the scent of lemon cleaner beneath it all. It reminded me of a library, the kind where people whisper out of respect, not fear. She wore her glasses low on her nose and looked over the power of attorney document I slid across the desk. "You want to revoke it?" she asked. "Today," I said. She paused, not with hesitation, but with something closer to consideration. "Are you sure, Arthur?" "I'm sure." No lecture followed, no drawn-out questions about family reconciliation. Lena understood something fundamental. That clarity rarely announces itself with fanfare. It arrives in silence, holding a checklist. "We'll file it today," she said, reaching for her stamp. "I'll notarize everything myself. You'll need to sign a few forms, but I'll make it easy." And she did. I signed with deliberate strokes, not rushed, not angry, just done. It wasn't revenge, it was repair. "I also want to update my will," I said. She glanced up. "Remove Daniel, completely. No executor role, no inheritance, nothing." She hesitated, pen poised. "You want to cut him out entirely?" I nodded. "He has a home, a family, a good job. He has what he wants, but I've seen what he values, and it's not me." She didn't argue, just opened a new template on her screen and asked, "Who should take his place?" I shrugged, the way you do when the future is wide open but your trust is narrow. "I don't know yet. Maybe a professional. Someone who sees me as more than a footnote." She nodded and jotted down a note. "And the house?" "No one in the family," I said firmly. "Sell it. Use the proceeds to fund the Fulton Street Men's Shelter. Every last cent." I pulled a brochure from my coat pocket, the same one I'd kept in my drawer for over 2 decades, folded and worn, the corners soft from handling. I stayed there once, before things got better. I want someone else's version of better to begin there. Lena didn't speak right away, just checked a few boxes on her screen, eyes narrowing with precision. "You're very clear about this." I looked out her window, where the sun was cutting across the tops of trees like it was slicing the day in half. "I've been unclear long enough." When everything was signed and stamped, she handed me the copies in a neat folder. "Keep this somewhere safe. You've made big shifts today." "I know," I said, "but they're the kind that settle the soul." She walked me to the door, her hand resting gently on my back. "If you change your mind, I won't," I said. The air outside was colder than I expected, even with the sun still up. I pulled my coat tighter and walked slower than usual, not because of pain, but because some moments deserve to be stretched. Back home, the phone was blinking. One new message. I played it, Daniel's voice, trying to sound casual but frayed at the edges. "Hey, got your voicemail about some legal stuff? Not sure what's going on. Jana says you were acting weird last weekend. Anyway, call me, okay?" I stood there listening, then pressed delete. No folder for later. No saved messages. That archive of disappointment was closed for good. The next morning I called a locksmith. The man who showed up was young, polite, with a buzz cut and hands that moved with confidence. He didn't ask why I was changing both locks. He just did the work. When he handed me the new keys, I made 4 copies. One stayed in my pocket, one went into the fireproof box in my hall closet, one I gave to Kay next door, and one I tucked into my safety deposit box downtown. That night, I slept like someone whose doors finally aligned with his decisions. Saturday arrived with the scent of soft rain, the kind that seeps rather than splashes, that settles into soil and lingers. I pulled on my old boots and stepped outside anyway. The garden had gone wild in my neglect. marigolds bent like tired shoulders, rosemary reaching in odd directions. I trimmed slowly, methodically, every clip of the shears, a small reclamation. Back inside, I gathered my banking documents and drove to the credit union. No line, just the low hum of printers and a woman named Trina who ushered me into her glass-walled office. "I'd like to review all authorized users on my accounts," I said. She scanned the screen. "Looks like you have one co-signer and one authorized cardholder. Daniel J. Green." She looked up. "Your son?" "Used to be," I said. She hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard. "Would you like to remove him?" "No," I replied, voice even. "I'd like to erase him. Completely." Trina didn't flinch, just nodded. "We'll remove access, cancel his card, reissue everything in your name only. We'll also update your security questions and lock access until you authorize otherwise in person." I nodded as she typed. On her desk was a pothos, its leaves glossy and heart-shaped. I used to keep one just like it in Daniel's nursery, back when he was a toddler and fascinated by dirt. He once tried to eat the soil. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the diaper bag. When the paperwork was done, Trina slid everything across to me for review. "If you'd like to set up alerts or establish a trust account, we can help." "Not yet," I said. "I'm still building the next version of my life." She smiled an honest, quiet smile. When I walked out into the drizzle, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something better, clean. Back at home, I opened the fireproof lockbox. Birth certificates, the deed, insurance policies. I removed Daniel's birth certificate not to destroy it, but to relocate it. I placed it in a folder marked History, then put it in a drawer far from everything else. That night, I slept with the window cracked open. The rain tapped a soft rhythm against the sill, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of being needed. I simply rested. Sunday arrived without fanfare. No calls, no knocks. Just the quiet shuffle of my own footsteps in a house that finally started to feel like it belonged only to me. I made tea, Earl Grey. Strong poured it into the chipped mug I'd been drinking from for 20 years, and sat by the window as the early light filtered through the blinds. Outside, the sidewalk glistened from last night's rain, and the hedges needed trimming again, not because anyone would visit, but because I still cared. That's the thing people forget. Dignity doesn't disappear when love goes unreciprocated. It just waits for you to remember it. I opened my address book, the one I hadn't updated in years, its tabs yellowed with time and the edges softened by thumbprints and habit. I flipped to G, to Green, and there they were, Daniel and Jana, Ruby and Owen. I drew a line through each name, not jagged, not angry. Just one smooth stroke, like letting something float downstream. Then I flipped to M and carefully wrote a new entry. Moore, Lena, attorney, estate planning. I stared at the ink until it dried, until it became fact. The house was still but no longer felt hollow. That afternoon, Kay stopped by again, this time with a bag of banana muffins and news that the stray cat had returned and was now sleeping under her deck. We named him Vernon, for no particular reason. Just felt right. She stayed for tea and a quiet conversation that wandered from arthritis creams to 1,972nd jazz without apology. When she left, I folded the tea towel and rinsed the mugs, noting the way the kitchen smelled like lemon and cinnamon. My home no longer held the scent of waiting. The paper I'd clipped from the classifieds was still on the fridge. 1-bedroom apartment, ground floor, east-facing windows, washer and dryer included. I called the number. A woman named Teresa answered. Her voice was warm, efficient. "Yes, we have one available," she said. "It's quiet. Mostly retirees and school teachers." "Do you allow pets?" I asked. "We do." "I don't have one," I said, "but I like knowing I could." We scheduled a viewing for Tuesday. I didn't pack that day. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing. On Monday, I called the real estate attorney Lena had recommended, Charles Lindell. His voice was calm, deep, the kind you trust without seeing the face behind it. I told him I wanted to place my home in a trust, ensure it couldn't be claimed by anyone who treated me like an afterthought. He didn't press, just asked for an appointment time. We scheduled for Thursday, and I spent the rest of that day gathering everything, the deed, the insurance papers, tax records, even the repair receipts I'd kept in a box marked house things. There was a receipt for the roof Daniel said I shouldn't fix. Let it go. It's not worth the money, he'd said. But I fixed it anyway. Same with the furnace, the water heater. Every single investment they never noticed, because they believed inheritance would be automatic. I laid it all out on the dining table like a war map. When I stepped back, I didn't see paper. I saw proof that I had mattered. The phone rang that night, a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the machine clicked on, and Jenna's voice spilled into the room. Arthur, we really don't know what's going on. Daniel's tried calling. Ruby's been asking about you. We're all worried. Please, just call us. I turned off the machine. The lie clung to the air like old cologne. Ruby hadn't said a word to me since spring. On my birthday, a quiet Tuesday in August, I received a single Facebook message from Jana. Hope you're having a great one. It was under a picture of their dog. That was the entire acknowledgement. I made myself a cupcake that evening, lit a candle, and ate it in silence. By Thursday, I'd ironed my best shirt and polished my shoes. I arrived at Charles Lindell's office 20 minutes early. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a calm that made the room feel smaller, safer. I want to create a living trust, I said. Everything goes to the Fulton shelter. The house, the proceeds, no family inheritance. He didn't blink. Simple enough. You'll be trustee and beneficiary for now. After, it'll transfer exactly as you direct. And remove Daniel from anything he's listed on. Bank accounts, insurance, power of attorney, all of it. Understood, we can notarize it all in-house. I'll prepare the paperwork. For nearly 2 hours, we reviewed forms, clarified terms, and signed with a kind of quiet ceremony. When it was done, he handed me a folder. This is your trust packet. Keep it safe. We'll file everything else. I thanked him, then walked out into the sun, my spine straighter than it had been in years. I stopped at the bakery on Main Street, the one I hadn't visited in nearly a decade. The girl behind the counter called me Sir and gave me a free shortbread cookie for being lovely. I bought a lemon tart and ate it in the car with the window rolled down, the sun warm on my knees. That night I sat in my living room, trust documents on the table beside me, and realized I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I had chosen myself. And that choice? It tasted better than any apology ever could. That evening, just as the sky began to melt into that soft gray-blue wash of twilight, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Daniel. He parked slowly, cautiously, like the driveway might reject his tires. He didn't knock right away. I watched from the window, unseen, as he sat behind the wheel for a full minute, his hands clenching and unclenching the steering wheel like he was rehearsing a monologue. When he finally stepped onto the porch, his shoulders were hunched, like he wasn't sure whether he was here to visit or apologize. I didn't open the door. He knocked once. Then again, more insistent this time. Dad, he called through the door, voice tentative. Please, I don't know what's going on. You changed the locks. You blocked my number. I just want to talk. He sounded less angry than off balance, like a man who suddenly realized he was no longer holding the pen to a story he assumed he was still writing. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, letting the silence do the speaking for me. Just tell me what's happening, he said, quieter now. I didn't answer. After a while, I heard him sigh, then retreat down the steps. The car reversed slowly, and I watched his taillights fade into the dusk. Only then did I stand, not triumphant, but steady. I poured myself a cup of tea black, no sugar, no milk, and sat back down in the same chair. My mother once told me, if they can't hear you gently, they'll hear your silence louder. That evening, my silence echoed all the way to his conscience. On Friday, I trimmed the hedges, swept the porch, and replaced the light bulb above the door. Not because I was expecting anyone, but because I was preparing to leave, and I wanted the house to know I hadn't stopped caring. It wasn't the house's fault, after all. This place had held me for 42 years. I moved in when Daniel was 5. He used to line his toy dinosaurs along the windowsill and name them after his kindergarten classmates. This one's Rebecca, he'd say, pointing to a brontosaurus. And this one's Mrs. Fulton. I had painted every wall of this house myself. After Clara died, I taught myself to tile the kitchen floor. I learned to replace gutter screens after the neighbor told me I should wait for my son to help. I stopped waiting a long time ago. That afternoon, I walked through each room with a notepad. In the guest room, there was an old dresser I once offered to Daniel and Jana when they were starting out. They said it was too old-fashioned. In the hallway, I paused by a cross-stitch Clara's sister had made, still hanging where it always had been. Peace lives here. The wall behind it was cleaner than the paint surrounding it, an outline of stillness. In Daniel's old room, the sailboat curtains still hung. I'd meant to replace them, but something always got in the way. The closet held a dusty box of baseball cards and a shoebox labeled "Private." I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out at the backyard. The old apple tree had grown crooked over the years, leaning slightly left, but it still bloomed every spring like it didn't know any better. I stayed there for nearly an hour, remembering the time Daniel climbed that tree and got stuck, crying until I came out barefoot, dragging the ladder. After I got him down, he clung to me trembling and whispered, "Don't tell anyone." And I never did. I remembered the first time he brought Jana home, how she looked around like the house was a hotel lobby that hadn't yet earned its stars. "It's cozy," she'd said. I remembered holding Ruby for the first time, her cheeks red and crumpled. Daniel cried that day. "She's perfect," he whispered. And she was. I remembered the Christmas when Jana told me not to bring food because the kids don't really eat traditional stuff, and how I brought a pie anyway. Ruby never touched it. Owen said it tasted like soap. They laughed. That was the year I stopped baking for their holidays, but I never stopped baking. I wrote a few notes in the pad. Leave the curtains. Take the quilt. In the kitchen, I opened the high cupboard above the stove, my baking cabinet. Everything was still there. Brown sugar, vanilla. The cinnamon Clara liked. The heavy ceramic measuring cups she'd given me on our 10th anniversary. I wrapped them carefully, each one in a dish towel, and placed them in a box labeled Keep. The next morning I called the number on the apartment listing. Teresa answered. "Yes, it's still available," she said. "Quiet neighborhood, lots of natural light. Do you allow cats?" I asked again. "We do," she said, smiling through the phone. "Good," I replied. "I still don't have one, but I like knowing I could." We scheduled the move, in for the first of the month 3 weeks from now. Just enough time to leave with care, not haste. That night I sat on the porch with a blanket and my tea, no longer looking out into the street with expectation. I wasn't waiting for headlights or apologies. I was just sitting, finally, with no performance left to give. The air was cool, the wind gentle, and for the first time in years, I wasn't wondering when someone would see me. I saw myself. Clearly, enough to begin again. 2 days later, Daniel returned. This time, there was no hesitation in the driveway. I heard the engine cut and the door shut with that familiar click sharp, final, like a page being turned too quickly. He climbed the steps and stood on the porch for a long moment before knocking. I met him at the door but didn't open it. The screen remained between us, thin but resolute. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe I just hadn't seen him clearly for a long time. "You blocked me," he said, not accusatory, just stunned, like he was still trying to fit the pieces together. "You changed everything." I nodded. "Yes." He shifted. "Why?" I didn't answer right away. I studied his face, the lines that had deepened since the last time we'd really looked at each other. He had Clara's eyes clear, blue-gray, but dulled now with confusion. "I heard what Jana said," I told him. "In the backyard, I heard you laugh." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his shoes. "I didn't mean it," he mumbled. "You know how she is. She talks without thinking." "A joke," I said quietly, "has a punchline. That was just cruelty wrapped in silence." He looked up. "I didn't know you were there." "That's exactly the problem," I said. He blinked. "So that's it? You're cutting me off because of one bad afternoon?" I wanted to laugh. "One afternoon? One moment doesn't erase a lifetime, but sometimes it reveals it." "No, Daniel," I said calmly. "That day was just the last brick in a wall you've been building for years. I was convenient when you needed help, but you haven't truly seen me, not in a long time." His shoulders stiffened. "Ruby said you're letting her visit." "She asked." I said, "and she came alone. You waited until your name started disappearing from documents. His eyes narrowed. So this is about money? No, I replied. This is about dignity. He glanced over my shoulder, maybe expecting to see something familiar: photos, keepsakes, reminders of a time when this house was filled with warmth and obligation. But there was only clean space now. I'd packed most of it away. The hallway was empty, stripped of the gallery of framed school portraits and holiday cards. I'll always be your son, he said, as if that alone should grant immunity. And I'll always be the man who gave you more than he should have, I replied. Then I stepped back and closed the door, not slammed, just shut. Through the window I watched him linger on the porch, uncertain. Then he left. That night I cried for exactly 7 minutes. I set a timer. I let the tears come, let the ache move through me like a cold front. Not because I regretted anything, but because endings deserve ceremony. Then I made tea, folded a dish towel, and placed another labeled box by the door. The kitchen table now held only what I needed: 1 cup, a lamp, and a shallow bowl of oranges. Everything else had been sorted, donated, packed. I didn't need much anymore, just what fit inside a smaller, truer life. On Sunday afternoon, I hosted tea. Nothing formal, nothing grand, no birthdays, no announcements, just warmth. Marcia came first, with her limp and her bag of crossword books. Then Ida, in her fur-trimmed coat, even though it was 60 degrees and sunny, and Nora, my old friend from the church choir, still wearing the perfume that smelled like rain and old letters. They didn't bring food, even though they'd offered. I told them it wasn't about that. I'd baked a single spice cake, not frosted, just enough to cut into 4 equal slices with 1 wedge left over. We sat by the window as the afternoon light turned gold. I poured tea into my chipped blue china, the set Clara and I picked up at an estate sale in 2092. No one asked about Daniel. No one brought up Ruby or Jana or the house. Instead, we talked about shoulder pain, rising grocery prices, and how Teresa from the leasing office had taken up birdwatching in the hallway. It was the most comfort I'd felt in years. At one point, the conversation quieted, the way it always does when women and men of a certain age share warm drinks and memories. A pause not from awkwardness, but from fullness. "I'm moving," I said. 3 sets of eyebrows lifted, but no one interrupted. "Found a small place across town. Quiet. Just enough space. I'll be gone by the end of the month." Ida leaned forward. "Does your son know?" "He doesn't need to," I said. Marcia nodded as if that answered everything. When they left, the house was still but not empty. I walked through each room again, this time not as a farewell but as a blessing. In the hallway, I paused in front of the last photo still on the shelf. It wasn't of Daniel. It was one of Clara and me, taken by a neighbor the day we finished painting the porch. We were both covered in flecks of paint, holding brushes like trophies. She was laughing. I was squinting into the sun. I wrapped the photo in a dish towel and placed it into the box labeled Essentials. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, 3 people drank tea in my kitchen today." No one interrupted. No one explained. We just existed. That line meant more than any Christmas card I'd ever sent, filled with forced joy and obligatory thanks. This was real, and real, finally, was enough. The next morning I awoke to a voicemail from Jana, short, clipped, as if read from a script rehearsed in irritation. "I heard you spoke to Ruby. Daniel says you've been hostile. If this is your way of getting attention, it's really sad. I played it once, then I deleted it. Hostile. That was the word they reached for now. Not forgotten, not discarded, hostile. That's what they call it when a person stops making themselves small, when you stop smiling through bruises no one bothered to see. That's what they name silence, when it no longer serves them." I stepped out into the yard with a cup of tea in hand. The air smelled like wet leaves and drying grass. The soil in the far corner of the garden where the marigolds used to bloom was still dark and soft. I knelt down, slow and careful, and dug my fingers into the earth. 3 marigold seeds from a packet I found in a kitchen drawer, just 3. Not to bloom, not really, just to mark something. A quiet flag planted in a life reclaimed. At 10:42 a.m. sharp on Wednesday, the doorbell rang. Not Kay, her knock was always soft, apologetic, like she worried the sound might inconvenience you. This knock was firm, measured, practiced. When I opened the door, Jana stood there in heels too tall for gravel and a coat the color of dishwater. Her lipstick was perfect, her expression brittle. "Arthur," she said, like reading my name off a clipboard. "Jana," I replied. I didn't invite her in. She walked past me anyway, as though the narrative she lived in still allowed it. She stood in the center of my living room, hands clasped too tightly over her purse. "This is getting out of hand," she began. "You've blocked Daniel. You've changed your accounts. Ruby is sneaking around behind our backs to call you. And now I hear you're moving?" I nodded once. All true. She blinked, thrown for a moment by the lack of resistance. "We're your family," she said, like it was a binding clause. "You can't just erase us because of a bad day." I studied her for a long breath. Not the clothes, not the words, just the way she stood. As though she believed confrontation was a performance, not a reckoning. "It wasn't one bad day," I said. "It was years. Years of being a footnote. Years of being tolerated instead of loved." Her voice sharpened. "We never asked you for anything." "No," I agreed. "You never asked. You expected." She stiffened. "I don't know what Daniel ever did to deserve this." "Good men," I said softly, "don't laugh when someone asks why their father is still alive." She stepped closer. "You think this is some noble stand? You're punishing him. You're punishing Ruby." I paused, not because she was right, but because the guilt she attempted to weaponize still knew the way to my ribs. I inhaled slowly. Ruby came to me alone, not because I summoned her, because she remembered who I was. Jana scoffed. "You've always been dramatic." "No," I said, voice calm but unshaken. "I've always been useful, and now I'm not. That's the difference." Her face hardened. "Daniel's devastated. He's trying. He's trying to protect what used to be his by default." "That's not trying, that's panic." Her eyes landed on the boxes stacked near the door. "So that's it? You're really going through with it?" I picked up the binder from the table. The one with the trust documents, the will, the notarized revisions. "I'm not running," I said. "I'm choosing." She laughed once, short and empty. "Don't expect us to come running when you change your mind." "I won't," I said. "That's the point." She left without another word, the door closing behind her like a clean punctuation mark. Later that evening, Ruby texted. She came home fuming. "You okay?" I replied. "Perfectly. Some doors need closing, Ruby. Doesn't mean you're on the other side." She sent back a heart emoji then. "Still bringing cookies Thursday. Don't bail." "I won't," I replied. And I wouldn't. The following morning, Lena called. "Everything's filed and active. The trust is complete. Your accounts are secured. You're the sole decision maker of every inch of your life." I closed my eyes and exhaled. "Thank you," I said, and those two words, unremarkable on paper, felt heavier than any apology I'd never received. "I'm proud of you, Arthur," she said. "It's funny," I replied, "how people only start saying that once you start saying no." By noon I was at the bank, folder in hand. The clerk, barely out of college, handled the documents like sacred artifacts. "We'll update all the beneficiaries," she said. "This authorizes the removal of your son from shared access?" "It does." Her hands moved across the keyboard with steady precision, the kind of focus I once mistook for indifference. Now I saw it clearly. She wasn't cold. She was prepared, like me. Afterwards, I walked to the post office and picked up a key for a new P.O. box. When they asked for a forwarding address, I declined. Anyone who truly needed to find me already knew where I was. At home, I brewed tea and opened the last envelope, my medical directive. One copy for my new doctor, one for the safe box. I signed it with slow care, like stitching the final seam in a coat, meant to last a lifetime. At 4:12, Ruby arrived, carrying a Tupperware of chocolate chip cookies and a smile that almost crumbled me. We sat on the porch, breaking soft cookies in half and letting the wind finish our sentences. No apologies, no posturing. Just crumbs and honesty and the quiet feeling of being found again. She brought a magazine too, one of those glossy ones with quizzes inside. "What type of flower are you?" was printed across the top in curly pink letters. We flipped to the back and answered the questions together in pencil, circling choices slowly, thoughtfully, like it mattered. I ended up as a lilac, quiet, observant, easily overlooked. Ruby was a marigold, resilient, stubborn, impossible to uproot. "That checks," she said, grinning as she stretched her legs out in front of her, sneakers scuffed, laces undone. The cookies were warm enough to melt in the middle, and we didn't say much for a while after that, just the creak of the porch swing and the occasional breeze tugging at the edges of the magazine. After a while, she looked at me, serious in that way only a teenager can be when they've finally decided to speak without testing the water first. "Dad says you're turning your back on family." I didn't answer right away. I sipped my tea and let the silence land before speaking. "He's hurt," she added softly. "Not that it excuses anything, but he talks about it now, about you. It's all he talks about." I nodded slowly. "Then he's finally saying something that matters." She picked at the fraying cuff of her sleeve. "I miss the old you." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the same eyes her father used to have when he was her age, before the world taught him how to swallow his softness. "No," I said gently. "You miss the version of me who never said no. That wasn't me. That was survival." Her head bowed slightly, like she understood, even if she didn't fully know why. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "It's just a sketch," she said quickly. "I don't know if it's any good." I opened it carefully. Pencil on notebook paper. Rough, unpolished, but honest. A woman maybe a little like me. Maybe not sat at a chessboard. Only 2 pieces on her side. A queen and a pawn. The other side had a full set, but her pieces were in winning position. Ruby watched me as I took it in. "She's not done," she said. "She's just finally starting to play her game." I blinked away the sting in my eyes. "Can I hang this in the new apartment?" She lit up. "Really? Really? As the sky turned from peach to lavender, she stood to leave. Backpack slung over one shoulder, sketchpad tucked under the other. "I know this doesn't fix everything," she said, "but I want to be around, if you'll have me." I nodded. "I will, but only if it's you who shows up, not a version shaped by what others expect." She nodded back, firm. Marigolds don't pretend. After she left, I sat for a long time with the drawing in my lap. The house was quiet, but not hollow. The kind of quiet that comes from rightness, not absence. I placed the sketch in the box marked Essentials. No ceremony, no music, just the sound of my hands doing something that felt like belonging. The next few days passed like that gently. I packed slowly, drawer by drawer, memory by memory. Not because I was sentimental, but because I wanted to know what I was keeping and why. If an object didn't make me feel stronger, it didn't come. I left behind things that had followed me through decades. Coats I no longer wore, tools I no longer needed, apology letters I never received. I opened a new box labeled "Not Coming With Me" and filled it without regret. The apartment viewing was scheduled for Thursday at 1 p.m. That morning, I woke early, brewed strong coffee, and ironed my shirt not for anyone else's eyes, just for my own dignity. The complex was smaller than the brochure made it seem. Brick buildings, trimmed hedges, a maple tree just beginning to shed. Teresa, the manager, greeted me with a smile and a clipboard. "Unit 1B, she said, unlocking the door. "South-facing windows, heat included. Neighbors are quiet." The space was small but honest, no echoes of past voices, no furniture arrangements made to please guests who never called. Just clean floors, soft light, and silence with room to grow into. The kitchen counter wasn't marble. The stove had only 4 burners. The fridge hummed like it was telling secrets. I touched the wall by the window and nodded. "I'll take it." Teresa blinked. "You don't want to think about it?" "I already have." By evening, the paperwork was signed. I paid the deposit and set the move-in date. The 1st of the month. 3 weeks. Enough time to say goodbye with intention, not haste. I returned home and wrote my new address on a blank card. Arthur Green, 128 Willowview, Apt 1B. I smiled as I tucked it into my drawer. Then I picked up my old address book and flipped to G. I drew a firm line through Daniel and Jana. I didn't cross out Ruby. I moved her name to R, where it belonged. Family is not inherited. It's chosen, sometimes twice. 2 days later, Daniel showed up again. I heard the engine first, that same hesitant idle in the driveway. He didn't knock right away this time. He stood on the porch, shifting his weight. When I opened the door, he was already mid-sentence. "You erased me," he said, not angry now, just tired. "You changed everything." I looked at him. Really looked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you stopped seeing me a long time ago," and I finally noticed. His brow furrowed. "I'll always be your son. And I'll always be the man who gave more than he should have. But now, I'm done giving to people who only remember me when they lose something." I closed the door gently. Behind it, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no knocking, just the breeze moving through the porch swing like it finally had room to breathe. That night, I didn't feel victorious. I cried again, not for 7 minutes this time, but 5. Shorter, sharper. Not grief, not rage. Just release. A necessary thinning of the air in my chest. Then I dried my face with the corner of a dish towel, made a fresh cup of tea, and placed one more box near the door. Labeled, "Keep," written in my best handwriting. My life was beginning to fit into manageable compartments. Not because I'd become smaller, but because I'd stopped carrying the weight of being indispensable to people who treated me like an afterthought. On Sunday, I did something I hadn't done in years. I hosted tea not for a holiday or an obligatory occasion, but for warmth. Just warmth. Just proof that people still gather without having to perform. Marcia arrived first, cane in one hand, crossword books in the other. Ida followed, in a faux fur coat, too extravagant for the weather but worn with purpose. Nora came last, still smelling like lilacs in old envelopes, the kind of scent that stays long after the person leaves. They didn't bring food, I told them not to. "This isn't a potluck," I'd said on the phone. "This is just tea." I baked a single cinnamon cake, not layered, not iced, just enough to cut into 4 generous pieces. We sat in the living room where most of the furniture was already gone, but somehow the absence made the space feel bigger, not emptier. I poured the tea into the blue china cups. Clara and I had once rescued from a yard sale, cups that had survived moves, falls, and 2 grandchildren. We talked about everything and nothing, how the price of grapes had gotten absurd, how someone named Edna was dating again at 82, and how the young woman in the leasing office had started birdwatching, and now called every crow Reginald. At one point the conversation dropped into that still, sacred silence that only happens when no one feels the need to fill it. I looked around and said simply, "I'm moving." 3 heads turned. No gasps, just questions in their eyes. Across town, 1st floor apartment, just me. Ida leaned forward, resting her teacup on her knee. "Does your boy know?" "He doesn't need to," I said. Marcia nodded like that explained everything. Nora said nothing, just reached for a second slice of cake and smiled. After they left, the house held their warmth like a memory that lingered in the floorboards. I walked through the rooms again, not to mourn them, but to thank them. In the hallway, I passed the shelf that used to hold photos of Daniel's wedding, Ruby's birthdays, Owen's first day of school. Most were already packed. All but one. A picture of Clara and me, covered in paint splatters, taken the day we finished the porch together. We were holding brushes like trophies, squinting into the sun, laughing. I wrapped it in a dish towel and placed it in the essentials box. That was all I needed from the past, something that still made me laugh without pain attached. That night I opened my journal and wrote a single line. 3 women drank tea in my kitchen today. No one explained themselves. No one apologized for existing. We just were. That meant more than any holiday card I'd mailed over the years with its brittle lines of forced cheer and clipped gratitude. This wasn't performance. This was truth. The next morning, I received a voicemail from Jana. Her voice had shifted tones again, colder now, polished. "I heard you spoke to Ruby. Carl says you've been acting erratic. If this is about money, we're not playing these games. You're making a spectacle." I deleted it without hesitation. Spectacle. That's what they call it when you stop whispering and start living visibly. I walked out into the yard, barefoot, the grass wet from last night's rain. In the far corner, the soil was damp and soft where I'd planted the marigold seeds. I knelt again, my knees creaking, but I didn't mind. I pressed a little deeper into the dirt, not planting anything new, just grounding myself. Some people dig to bury, others dig to grow. I was learning to do both. That Wednesday, the doorbell rang precisely at 10:42 a.m. again. And again, I knew it wasn't the postman or Kay or even Ruby. No, this knock had intent. When I opened the door, Janice stood there in the same two high heels, lips pressed into a line, coat folded perfectly across her arm. She didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped inside like she still believed she had inherited access. She stood in the middle of the half-empty living room, like a woman about to deliver a closing argument. "This has gone too far," she said. "You've cut Daniel out of everything. You're moving. You're letting Ruby sneak behind our backs. We're your family." The word family dropped like a threat. I didn't flinch. "Family isn't proven by proximity," I said. "It's proven by presence, and you all stopped showing up a long time ago." She crossed her arms. "We never asked you for anything." "Exactly," I replied. "You just assumed I'd give it." Her expression tightened. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm freeing myself." She looked around at the labeled boxes like they were betrayal made visible. "You'll regret this when you're alone." "I've already been alone," I said. "Now I'm just making it official." I handed her nothing. No ground. No guilt. Just the space between us, which now stretched wider than the living room. She left without slamming the door. She didn't need to. The quiet was louder. That evening, Ruby texted. She came home steaming. "You okay?" I wrote back. "Perfectly. Some doors need closing, Ruby. That doesn't mean you're on the wrong side of them." She replied with a heart, then, "Still bringing cookies Thursday. Don't you dare ghost me." I smiled and replied, "I wouldn't dream of it." And I didn't. I wouldn't, because now, finally, I wasn't waiting to be asked to the table. I was building my own, and it had room just enough for people who came with care in their hands. Thursday morning, Lena called. Her voice was warm, steady like the final stitch in a hem you've been meaning to mend for years. "Everything's signed, filed, confirmed," she said. "The trust is active, your accounts are protected, and your will is updated. You're now the sole decision-maker of every inch of your life." I closed my eyes and smiled, letting those words settle into the spaces inside me that had gone quiet for too long. "Thank you," I said. And though it was only 2 syllables, they carried the weight of a man finally stepping back into the home of himself. "I'm proud of you, Arthur," she added. I let the silence stretch before replying. "It's funny," I said. "How many people only say that after you've started saying no?" Ugh. By noon, I was at the bank with my trust binder tucked neatly under my arm. The clerk at the desk couldn't have been older than 25, but she treated the paperwork like scripture, careful and precise. "We'll update the beneficiaries immediately," she said. "And this document removes your son from all shared access?" "Yes," I answered evenly. "No apology, no softening of the edges. Just the truth, clean and simple." She nodded, typing with focus, never once asking for justification. She was the kind of young woman I imagined Ruby might become, clear-eyed, efficient, unbothered by outdated expectations. Afterward, I walked 2 blocks to the post office and picked up the key to my new P.O. box. When the clerk asked if I wanted to set up a forwarding address, I said, "Number." I didn't need my past to follow me, and anyone who truly needed to find me already knew where to look. Back at home, I made a fresh pot of tea and opened the final envelope waiting on my desk, my medical directive. 1 copy for my new physician, 1 for the fireproof box. I reviewed it line by line, every clause, every instruction, a quiet confirmation that I had reclaimed every corner of my life. At 4:30, Ruby arrived. She was out of breath, backpack slung over one shoulder, a plastic container in her hands. "Chocolate chip again," she said, smiling. "Extra gooey this time." She dropped onto the porch bench with the ease of someone who knew they belonged. In her other hand, she held a magazine with a new quiz circled in pen. "What kind of tree are you?" We laughed as we circled answers. Favorite seasons, how often we shed emotional baggage, whether we preferred birds or squirrels. I was a birch tree, steady, enduring, slow to burn. She was an elm, resilient, adaptive, often underestimated. "That sounds about right," she said, licking cookie crumbs off her thumb. As the sun dipped behind the neighbor's garage, she leaned back and swung her legs. "Dad says you've changed," she murmured. that you're turning your back on family. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I refilled her glass of lemonade and asked, "What do you think?" She looked down at the cookie in her hand. "I think people get scared when you stop being what they expect." I smiled. "That's called truth, Ruby. Sometimes it looks a lot like rebellion to people who benefit from your silence." She nodded slowly, then pulled out a folded paper from her backpack. "Another sketch," she said, shy. "I drew it last night. I unfolded it carefully." This time it was a small kitchen table by a window, 2 chairs, one with a steaming cup, the other empty but facing inward. "Can I hang this in the apartment?" I asked. Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Of course," I said. "It's the first thing I want to see in the morning." She stayed until just after 6. When she left, she hugged me tightly. No rush, no apology, just presence. After the door closed, I stood in the living room, surrounded by labeled boxes and quiet satisfaction. There was no fear left in me. No dread of who might approve, who might show up, who might ask why. I had built something, not large, not loud, but mine. And in a life full of giving things away without asking for anything back, that was the rarest kind of wealth. 1 week after the move, the house sold. I got the call on a Tuesday morning from the realtor, a pleasant woman with a voice like a news anchor. The offer came in just above asking, she said. An older couple, no children. They're looking for something with character. I almost laughed. They'd found it. That house had more character in its walls than most people have in a lifetime. I didn't go back, not even for the final walkthrough. I'd already said goodbye to every room, every corner. I gave Charles the authority to sign on my behalf. "It's done," he told me over the phone. I hung up and stood in the middle of my apartment, small, quiet mine. I opened a new bank account under the name of the trust and transferred the full proceeds from the sale. Not for later, for now. The next day I walked into the Fulton Street shelter with the check in hand. The director, a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, looked down at the amount and began to cry. I'd already done my crying. This wasn't grief. It was intention. "This is for the men who leave with nothing," I said. "For the ones starting over with empty pockets but full hearts." She squeezed my hand and whispered thank you like a prayer. I nodded and walked out into the morning sun, lighter than I'd felt in decades. That night, I made soup. Not for a guest. Not for a holiday. Just because I liked the way leeks soften in butter. The radio played soft jazz, no ads, no talking. I ate standing up by the stove, robe tied loosely, bowl in hand. No table setting, no performance, just hunger met with care. Around 8:30 the buzzer rang. Ruby's voice crackled through the intercom. "Can I come up?" "Of course." She came in carrying a shoebox, oversized sweatshirt sleeves pulled over her hands. "What's in the box?" I asked. "Stuff I'm not ready to keep at home," she said. Inside, a notebook, a charger, a necklace that wasn't her mother's style, and a photo of us at the zoo when she was 5 chocolates smeared on her cheek. I'd forgotten that day. She hadn't. She sat cross-legged on the floor and said, "I don't want to live there when I'm older. With them, I mean." I nodded. "You don't have to," I said. "You get to choose." "Even if they hate me for it?" she asked. "Especially then," I said. She was quiet for a while, then asked, "Do you think people can change?" I thought about Daniel, about the letter I hadn't answered. "Sometimes," I said. "But the better question is, can they stop pretending?" She looked up at me like she already knew the answer. Before she left, she hugged me tighter than she ever had. After the door closed, I stood at the window, watching the soft glow of the city slip into night. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss Daniel's silences or Jana's sidelong glances. I didn't miss the man I used to be, the one who waited, who hoped, who apologized with pie and yard work. That version of me had served his purpose. Now, I saw myself clearly, and that at last was enough. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of someone you love, or perhaps of a part of yourself that's been quiet for too long, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, we share stories that aren't always loud but always matter. Stories about reclaiming identity, choosing peace, and setting your own table when no one offers you a seat. And if you're listening from a quiet room, a long commute, or just a moment of stillness in your day, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your voice belongs here too. Subscribing helps us continue telling the kinds of stories that linger, ones that challenge, comfort, and remind us that it's never too late to begin again. Click that subscribe button, tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode, and if this story brought you clarity or calm, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. This isn't just a channel. It's a place for people who've lived through the unspoken, the overlooked, the almosts. So stick around. The next story might just be yours.